The Crystal Throne Hall of the Valyrian Empire was normally the safest and grandest place in the entire city. Its tall blue pillars shined like frozen lightning, and the floating guard platforms moved silently around the queen, watching every angle. But today, the hall shook again and again as explosions hit the palace walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. The lights flickered. The smell of burning metal spread through the air. Queen Arathea stood in the center of the hall, trying to keep her voice calm even while fear grew inside her. She wore a glowing silver crown, and her long cloak looked like it was made of living stars. But even with all her pride and strength, she was not ready for what happened next. Her royal guards, tall, armored warriors who had sworn loyalty to her since childhood, looked at each other with panic. Then, one by one, they began to move backward toward the exit. "Hold your positions," the queen ordered, but they did not listen. The huge gate at the far end trembled as enemy machines battered it. The guards panicked even more. One of them dropped his spear and ran. The others followed him. Their footsteps echoed loudly as they abandoned their queen without a single word. The queen felt something sharp in her heart. Betrayal. Confusion. Fear. Her own protectors had left her in the moment she needed them the most. But someone did not move. Elias Ward, the only human inside the palace, stood near the lower steps of the throne. He was not a soldier, not a warrior, not even trained for battles. He was only a visiting human advisor who came to help with trade agreements and diplomatic talks. Yet he walked forward while everyone else ran away. The queen stared at him, shocked. "Human. Leave at once," she said. "The rebels are breaking through. You cannot survive this." Elias looked at the closing gate, then looked back at her. His voice was steady, calm, and determined. "Your guards ran. I won't." The queen blinked. She did not expect such words from a human. Humans were known for curiosity and strange ideas, but not for facing danger for someone they barely knew. "You will die," she warned softly. "Maybe," Elias said. "But humans don't run when someone we respect is in danger." Another explosion blasted the outer wall. The hall shook so violently that the throne itself nearly tipped over. The queen grabbed the railing to keep her balance. The enemy gate locks glowed red as they heated from forced entry. The queen felt her courage slipping. She was a strong ruler, but she had never been alone in danger before. Now, her voice almost broke as she said, "I cannot risk you for my sake." Elias stepped closer and answered, "You never abandoned your people. Someone should show you the same." The queen felt her chest tighten at his words. There was no fear in his eyes, only stubborn loyalty. The gates finally cracked open, and a wave of smoke entered the hall. Dark shapes on the other side prepared to charge inside. Elias quickly grabbed the queen's arm. "There's a hidden passage behind your throne," he said. "Go." She stared at him in surprise. "How do you know about that passage?" "Only my architects know. I explore places when I'm bored," he replied quickly. "Move." The queen found herself being pulled toward the rear wall. Elias pressed a hidden panel that opened a narrow metallic doorway. The moment the door clicked open, the main hall gate exploded behind them, sending burning debris flying across the room. Elias pushed the queen inside and jumped after her just as a rebel machine stomped into the hall. He shut the secret door, and the booming battle sounds became muffled. The passageway was dark and narrow. The queen leaned on the wall, breathing hard. She was still shocked by the danger, by the betrayal, and by the human standing beside her. "You should have left," she whispered. "And let you get captured?" Elias shook his head firmly. "Not happening." They moved quickly through the tight corridor. The floor sloped downward, leading them deeper under the palace. The walls glowed faint blue, reflecting their shadows as they hurried through the narrow path. "Human," the queen said after a moment, "I do not understand your choice. You had no duty to protect me." "I didn't need a duty," Elias said. "I saw someone in danger. That was enough." She studied him quietly as they walked. In her empire, loyalty was earned through fear or power. But this human did not fear her. And she had no power over him. His loyalty came from something else, something she could not name. Suddenly, The ground shook from another blast, and a piece of the ceiling broke loose, crashing down near them. Elias grabbed the queen by the waist and pulled her aside before it hit her. His reaction was fast, almost natural, as if protecting her was something he did every day. The queen looked at his hands holding her, and for a brief moment she felt a warmth she had never felt before. Safety. They reached a small exit hatch that opened to a side balcony overlooking the lower city. The sight made the queen's heart sink. The city was burning. Towers collapsed in the distance, and smoke covered the skies. Rebel banners hung from rooftops. Civilians hid indoors, frightened and helpless. They took the whole city in one day, she whispered. Not all of it, Elias said. You're still here. She looked at him with worry. If they find me, they will destroy everything that remains. My capture will break the last hope my people have. Elias nodded. Then we don't let them find you. She gave a tired smile. You speak as if it is simple. You speak as if it is simple. He shrugged. It isn't. But running together is easier than running alone, right? The queen did not answer, but she felt her chest warm again. She had always stood above everyone, ruler, commander, queen. No one had ever spoken to her in such a familiar way. No one had stood beside her without fear. Elias helped her climb down the balcony using old support beams. They landed in a deserted courtyard. The queen's leg hurt from earlier debris, and she struggled to walk. Elias noticed and offered his arm. She hesitated for a moment, unused to being touched by humans. But she accepted his help, placing her hand gently on his arm for balance. His strength felt steady and dependable. They moved through narrow alleyways, away from the palace. Rebel drones flew above them, scanning streets with red beams. Elias pulled the queen under a fallen archway, just in time to avoid detection. She whispered, "How can a human be so calm in all this?" "I'm not calm," Elias said. "I just can't let fear stop me." The queen looked at him with surprise. "That is admirable." Elias didn't react to the compliment, but his grip on her hand tightened slightly as they continued moving. Another tremor shook the city. In the distance, they heard citizens crying, soldiers shouting, machines stomping. The queen felt guilt growing inside her. Her people were suffering, and she could not help them. Elias noticed her expression and spoke gently. "You can still save them. But first, you must survive this day." His simple words gave her unexpected strength. After a long walk through damaged streets, they reached an abandoned shelter. Elias guided her inside and checked if it was safe. The queen sat on a broken crate, breathing slowly. "Why did your guards leave you?" Elias asked softly. The queen closed her eyes. "Fear or ambition? Perhaps both. Some wish to live. Others wish to serve the rebels. Loyalty disappears quickly when power shifts." Elias sat across from her. "Then they never deserved to serve you." She opened her eyes and looked at him with quiet gratitude. Those words touched her more deeply than she expected. "You stayed," she whispered. "You, a human. Why?" Elias answered with a calm voice. "Because your life matters. Not your title. You." The queen felt her heartbeat slow. She had heard many voices in her life, flattery, fear, political false promises, but no one had ever spoken to her with such honest humanity. She looked at him for a long moment. And for the first time in her reign, she felt truly protected. Not by armor or soldiers, but by one human who chose to stand with her when everyone else ran. Outside, the city continued to burn. But inside that small shelter, the queen realized something important. This human might be her only ally now, and perhaps the strongest one she could ever have. The shelter where Elias and Queen Arethea hid was quiet for a while. Only the distant sounds of burning towers and shouting soldiers reached them. The queen sat on the broken crate, trying to steady her breathing. Elias watched the doorway, thinking through every possible escape path. Her silver crown was bent, her royal cloak torn from falling debris. Yet she still sat with a quiet dignity that surprised Elias. Even frightened, She looked like someone born to lead. After a short silence, the queen finally spoke. "Elias, where do we go now?" "To the lower city," he replied. "If we stay near the palace, the rebels will find you fast." The queen nodded. "The lower city is dangerous too." "Everything is dangerous tonight," Elias said calmly. "But hiding is not a plan. Moving is." The queen stood slowly, wincing. Her leg injury was worse than she had shown earlier. Elias quickly stepped beside her and offered his arm again. "You are hurt," he said. "It is only a small wound," she replied, though the pain was clear in her eyes. "Small wounds become big problems if you pretend they're nothing." She stared at him for a moment, half surprised, half grateful, and accepted his support. Together they left the shelter and stepped into the ruined courtyard. Smoke blew across the sky, making the air heavy. Broken stones, metal fragments, and black scorch marks covered everything. The queen whispered, "This city was the heart of my empire." Elias answered softly, "And hearts can be healed." They moved carefully along the narrow alley, staying close to the shadows. Drone lights swept across the rooftops. Whenever a red beam came near, Elias gently pulled the queen behind a fallen column or into a narrow gap between buildings. He walked ahead first, checking corners before letting the queen move forward. His movements were quick, but quiet, alert like a soldier, though he had never trained as one. The queen noticed this. "How do you know how to do this?" she asked as they reached an abandoned marketplace. "My home city on Earth had its own dangers," Elias replied. "Not like this. But enough that I learned a few things." She looked at him with curiosity. "I know little of Earth. Humans are strange to us. You speak softly, but you act with a strength that does not match your body." Elias smiled a little. "Humans don't need big bodies to be strong." Before she could reply, a loud mechanical roar filled the air. 2 rebel patrol bikes sped through the far end of the marketplace, scanning for survivors. Elias quickly guided the queen into a small storage shed and closed the metal door quietly. Inside, the shed was dark except for a tiny crack of moonlight from a broken roof tile. The queen stood close to Elias, breathing carefully so the rebels outside wouldn't hear. The patrol bikes slowed. Their engines hummed dangerously near the shed. The queen whispered, "If they find me, they will end everything." "Then they won't find you," Elias whispered back. He placed his hand gently on her arm, steadying her. She felt his steadiness, his calm heartbeat, and her panic softened. She didn't know how a human could remain so composed in such a moment. The patrol eventually moved on, the sound fading into the distance. Elias waited a few more seconds before opening the door a crack. "Clear," he said. They stepped out. The queen drew a slow breath of relief. "Thank you," she said quietly. Elias brushed it off. "Just staying alive." But she shook her head. "You do more than that." They continued through the ruined streets. With every step, the queen leaned slightly on Elias. She tried not to show weakness, but Elias felt the pressure of her weight and knew she was struggling. At one point, the queen nearly collapsed. Elias quickly caught her. "You need to rest," he insisted. "I cannot rest. The rebels are closing in, and you won't escape if you can't even stand." She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Elias helped her sit behind a fallen statue for cover. He took a piece of cloth from his sleeve and wrapped her wounded leg. The queen watched him carefully. "Why do you care so much for my pain?" "Because pain slows you down," he answered simply. "If I protect you, I protect our chance to escape." The queen smiled faintly. "Humans always have simple answers for complex problems. It keeps life easy," Elias said. As he tightened the cloth, the queen said softly, "Your touch is strange. It is gentle, calmer than I expected." Elias froze for a second, unsure what to say. His ears warmed a little, but he kept working. "When people are hurt," he finally replied, "gentleness helps more than anything else." The queen watched him quietly. Something about the human's kindness touched her, something deep, something unfamiliar. They continued onward. Reaching the lower district, they found destroyed shops and broken vehicles scattered on the streets. Smoke curled from burning houses. The queen's eyes filled with sadness for her people. "We failed them," she whispered. "No," Elias corrected. "You didn't fail anyone. Your guards failed you. You're still fighting." She looked at him with a surprised softness. "You truly believe that?" "Yes," Elias said firmly. "I don't follow rulers." The queen's heart warmed slightly. Elias did not speak to her like a subject. He spoke like someone who saw her not as a throne, but as a person. Suddenly they heard footsteps, multiple, heavy, fast. Elias grabbed her hand and pulled her behind a collapsed food stall. The queen leaned close beside him as a group of rebel soldiers marched past. Their armor reflected the orange glow of fires. They carried stun rifles and scanning devices. Elias waited until they disappeared into another street before exhaling slowly. The queen looked at him. "If they had seen us..." "They didn't," he said. "That's what matters." They continued through narrow passages until they reached an old workshop. Elias pushed open the door. Inside were rusted tools, broken machines, and thick dust. "This will work," he said. "We can stay here for a bit." The queen sat on a bench, exhausted. Elias searched the workshop for useful items. He found a reflective metal sheet, an old pipe, and some wiring. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Preparing a distraction," he said. Within minutes, Elias had created a noise trap using the materials. He placed it near the back exit of the workshop. If triggered, it would make loud clanging sounds enough to confuse any rebel scout. The queen watched him with quiet amazement. "You make simple things powerful. Humans are good at that," Elias said with a small grin. She smiled too, something rare for a queen who carried the weight of an empire. Suddenly, a drone hovered outside the broken window. Elias quickly moved beside the queen and shielded her with his body as the drone scanned the room. His arm wrapped around her shoulders, protecting her instinctively. The queen felt his closeness, his warmth, his steady breathing. She looked up at him, and for a moment, she saw not a human advisor, but someone who risked everything for her. The drone moved on. "You protected me again," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me," Elias said. "It's what anyone should do." "But no one else did," she said, her voice soft and full of pain. Elias paused. "Then they don't deserve you as their queen." The queen looked at him deeply, her eyes shining in the dim light. "You speak as if you understand me." "I'm trying," Elias replied. After a long silence, the queen said, "Elias, I thought humans were weak. I thought you were simple, fragile beings. But now I see something different." Elias sat beside her. "What do you see?" "I see someone who stands when others run." Her voice trembled slightly. "And someone who makes me feel safe when my entire empire falls apart." Elias didn't know what to say. He simply nodded and looked away, trying to keep his emotions steady. Outside, rebel soldiers shouted orders as they searched nearby buildings. The queen leaned closer to Elias and whispered, "We must move again soon." "In Iwa." "I know," he said. "But first, you need a moment to breathe." She rested her head lightly against the wall, her eyes half closed. Elias sat beside her, watching the door, guarding her in silence. For the first time since the palace fell, the queen allowed herself to relax, even if only for a moment, because she was not alone, because a human stayed, because someone believed in her when no one else did, and that small truth gave her strength. The night grew colder, as Elias and Queen Arathea rested inside the old workshop. Smoke drifted through the broken window. The city outside was still full of danger, flashing lights, shouting patrols, and the metal stomping of rebel machines. But for a few minutes, the queen breathed more calmly, gathering her strength. Elias kept watch at the doorway. His eyes scanned every shadow. He could hear his own heartbeat in the silence, steady but alert. Protecting her had become his only focus, his only mission. After some time, the queen finally opened her eyes. "We must continue," she said softly. Elias nodded. "More patrols are coming this way. We need to reach the last ridge before sunrise." The queen frowned slightly. The last ridge? That climb is difficult even on a calm day. That's why they won't expect us to go there, Elias replied. The old signal tower on the ridge may still work. If we reach it, loyal forces outside the planet shield might detect your code. The queen stood with effort. Then we go. Lead the way. Elias supported her again, letting her lean on him as they left the workshop and moved through the back alley. They stayed low, avoiding drone lights. The streets ahead were cracked, burning in some places, but there were fewer rebels in the lower district now. As they walked, the queen studied Elias quietly. "You move with purpose," she said. "Not like a diplomat. Diplomats run when things break," Elias replied with a small smile. "But humans, we learn to survive in many ways. You surprise me each moment," she said softly. He didn't answer. He only tightened his grip on her arm and kept going. The road to the ridge. After almost an hour of careful movement, they finally reached the outer part of the city, where buildings grew fewer and the open desert began. A cold wind swept across the ground. The last ridge towered in the distance, a long, rocky climb that stretched like a sharp spine against the night sky. The queen looked at it with a heavy breath. "That will not be an easy ascent." "No," Elias agreed. "But it's our only hope." They stepped into the desert, moving slowly through the sand and rocks. Elias kept glancing behind them. The queen followed his gaze. "You fear the rebels will chase us here?" she asked. "They chase everything," Elias said. "But fear doesn't matter. Only the next step matters." She nodded quietly. "Humans have a strange kind of courage." Elias shrugged. "Sometimes it's not courage. Sometimes it's just stubbornness." His answer made her smile softly. Even in danger, he found simple ways to speak that eased her heart. They continued walking until the ground became uneven and the slope began. The queen tried to climb, but her injured leg trembled. She stumbled, and Elias immediately caught her shoulder. "You're pushing too hard," he said. "I cannot slow us down," she replied. "We move at the speed your body allows," he said firmly. "Not faster." She gazed into his eyes for a moment. There was no fear there, only calm, patient strength. "Very well," she whispered. The carry. The climb grew more difficult as they reached higher rocks. The wind became sharper, cutting through their clothes. The queen tried again to climb, but the pain in her leg made every step harder than the last. Her breathing grew heavy. Elias stopped. "Climb on my back," he said. The queen's eyes widened. "Elias, I cannot." "You can," he said simply. "You're tired, you're hurt, and we don't have time." The queen hesitated. She had never been carried in her life, not by guards, not by servants. She was a queen. But at this moment, she realized she had no strength to argue. Slowly, she placed her hands on his shoulders. Elias crouched down, allowing her to climb onto his back gently. When her arms wrapped around him, he steadied her legs and began to climb. The queen felt the steady rhythm of his breathing against her. She could hear his heartbeat, firm and consistent. She rested her head lightly near his shoulder, feeling an unfamiliar mix of comfort and guilt. "You should not carry me," she whispered. "A queen should carry her own burdens." "You carried your people's burdens alone for years," Elias said. "Let someone help you now." She closed her eyes for a moment. His words felt warm inside her chest. He climbed slowly but surely. The rocks were sharp, and the wind pushed against him, but he did not stop. The queen could feel the strain in his muscles, yet he never once complained. "You risk too much for me," she murmured. "No," he replied. "I risk this for what you stand for." "And what do I stand for?" she asked softly. "For hope," he said. "And that matters." A quiet warmth filled her heart. In this darkness, he still saw something worth protecting. The ambush. When they reached a narrow canyon near the ridge, the wind suddenly carried distant mechanical sounds. Elias set the queen down gently and crouched behind a large rock. The queen followed his gaze and felt her blood turn cold. Rebel scouts were approaching the canyon from both sides, 6 soldiers with rifles and scanning gear. They followed us, she whispered. Elias exhaled slowly. Then we fight smart. The Queen looked worried. You cannot fight 6 armed soldiers alone. I don't need to beat them, Elias said. I only need to stop them long enough for you to escape. She stared at him, shocked. You cannot stay behind. Elias placed his hands on her shoulders gently. If they catch you, the Empire falls. If they catch me, well, I'm just one man. That is not true, she said, her voice trembling, but Elias smiled softly. Erethea, go. Climb to the top. Send the signal. I'll stall them. Then he stood up quietly and moved toward the canyon's entrance. The Queen's breath caught in her throat as she watched him walk away. She felt something she was not used to feeling, fear of losing someone. The rebel scouts spotted Elias first. There, human detected, one shouted. Elias grabbed a stone and threw it at the far wall. It created a loud echo, confusing them. Then he ran in the opposite direction, drawing all their attention away from the Queen. Blaster shots fired. Echoes filled the canyon. Elias hid behind rocks, moving quickly, forcing the rebels to chase him instead of scanning the ridge. The Queen, watching from above, felt her heart pounding painfully. She whispered, Elias, please don't fall. Her decision. At the halfway point of the ridge, the Queen stopped. Her legs trembled not from injury this time, but from conflict inside her heart. She looked up at the towering ridge. The tower was close enough to reach if she kept climbing, but she looked back at the canyon. The rebels were cornering Elias. There were too many of them. She could see him dodging shots, but he was hurt, his arm grazed by a blast, his breathing heavy. He was fighting alone. For her. The Queen felt something powerful rise inside her, a strength she didn't know she had. She could not abandon him. Not the one who stayed. Not the one who protected her when everyone else ran. No, she whispered. I will not leave you. Her crown glowed faintly as she turned back toward the canyon. Despite her injured leg, she climbed downward and moved silently behind the rebels. Elias was nearly trapped when a sudden shockwave hit the ground. The Queen used a discarded rebel device, one of their own tactical stun tools, and activated it at just the right moment. The explosion sent dust flying and knocked the rebels off balance. Elias looked up in disbelief as the Queen emerged through the smoke, holding a fallen soldier's staff. You came back? He said, stunned. She stood beside him, breathing hard, her eyes fierce. You stayed for me, Elias. I stay for you. Together, they fought. Elias used rocks and quick movements, while the Queen used her staff with surprising skill. The rebels retreated, confused by the unexpected unity between human and Queen. When the battle ended, Elias stared at her with awe. You could have escaped. I could have, she said softly. But I will not survive a future where you are gone. Elias felt his chest tighten at her words. He didn't know what to say. He only nodded, overwhelmed. Come, she said gently. We climb together now. And for the first time since the fall of the palace, they climbed with a shared strength, not just survival, but trust. Climbing the last ridge together was slower now. Elias had taken a hit on his arm during the fight, and the Queen's leg still pained her with every step. Yet neither of them suggested stopping. The wind howled against them, trying to push them back down the rocky slope, but they ignored it and pushed forward. The stars above were fading as dawn approached. A weak light painted the horizon, revealing the long journey behind them. Smoke still rose from the burning city far below. It looked broken, but not defeated, just like its queen. When they reached the top of the ridge, the old signal tower stood tall, though damaged and cracked from years without maintenance. Its metal plates shook in the wind, and its antenna leaned dangerously to one side. This is it, Elias said, breathing heavily. The Queen placed a hand on the metal structure. If it still works, our loyal fleets will hear my identity code. I racked. And if it doesn't? Elias asked. Then we have no other way, she answered calmly. Elias nodded. He admired her strength even now. She was exhausted, injured, and hunted. yet she still spoke with the dignity of a ruler. They entered the tower through a half-broken door. Inside, wires hung from the ceiling. Old screens flickered faintly, and dust covered the floor, but the central console still hummed with a weak pulse of energy. "It still has power," Elias said, surprised. The Queen stepped toward the console. "Help me activate it." Elias cleared debris from the control panel, while the Queen connected the remaining energy nodes. Sparks jumped from the wires, but they kept working. Finally, the main screen glowed blue, showing ancient Valyrian symbols. The Queen typed a long set of codes, her identity sequence, royal authorization, and emergency distress signal. But when she pressed the final key, the tower suddenly shook violently. "What was that?" Elias asked. The Queen's eyes widened. The rebels installed a self-destruct system. They knew someone might try to use the tower. The floor vibrated. Warning alarms echoed through the chamber. "They triggered it when we started the signal," Elias said. "We have limited time." "How long?" she asked. Elias checked the blinking red lights. "Maybe a minute." The Queen tightened her jaw. "That is enough." She entered the final activation command. The console gave a loud beep and began transmitting her signal into the sky. A blue beam burst from the tower's antenna, shooting upward through the atmosphere. It was faint at first, then brighter, then strong enough to break through the planet's shield. But the tower groaned as the self-destruct countdown accelerated. "Arathea, we need to go," Elias shouted. "Not until the signal is complete," she answered. The tower shook harder. Cracks spread across the walls. The antenna outside sparked violently. Elias quickly ran to her and shielded her with his uninjured arm as debris fell from the ceiling. The Queen was surprised again by how naturally he protected her. She whispered, "Elias, you will get hurt." "I'm already hurt," he said with a tired smile. "This is nothing." The beam flickered once, twice, then stabilized. The screen displayed one final message. "Signal sent. Loyal fleets alerted." The Queen's eyes widened with relief. "It worked." "Good," Elias said. "Now we run." They raced to the exit as the tower continued to shake. Elias guided her through falling metal beams, pushing aside debris and shielding her whenever something collapsed near them. Just as they reached the door, the ground beneath them jolted violently. Elias grabbed the Queen's wrist and pulled her outside just before an explosion tore through the tower's interior. They staggered onto the ridge, coughing from the smoke. The tower collapsed behind them, sending sparks and dust into the dawn sky. "We did it," the Queen whispered, breathing hard. Elias rested against a rock. "Now, we wait. The sky answers." Morning sunlight slowly warmed the ridge. Elias and the Queen sat together, exhausted. The Queen leaned her head lightly against a stone, her breathing slow but steady. For a long moment, the world felt strangely peaceful. Then the Queen looked up. Her eyes widened. "Elias, look!" A faint rumble echoed through the sky. The planet's shield, the massive golden barrier that trapped them, flashed, then flickered, then broke apart like shattered glass. Through the cracks, dozens of starships descended from orbit. Their silver hulls glowed like suns, their engines leaving long trails of light behind them. They formed a protective circle over the city. "The loyal fleets," the Queen whispered. "They came." Elias smiled. "Told you your people would answer." The Queen stared at the human for a long time. Then she said softly, "They answered because you helped me send the call." Shuttles descended quickly, landing near the burning city. Loyal troops poured out, engaging rebel forces with disciplined precision. Rebel banners fell one by one. Distant explosions marked the collapse of enemy strongholds. The city was being reclaimed. The Queen felt tears fill her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming relief that her people were not lost after all. A new march. A loyalist shuttle spotted them at the ridge and landed nearby. Soldiers in clean blue armor hurried out, kneeling before the Queen. "My Queen," their captain said, voice trembling. "We came as soon as your signal reached us. Forgive us for arriving late." The Queen stood tall, despite her injury. "Rise, Captain. There is much to restore." The captain nodded, then looked at Elias with confusion. "This human, Is he a prisoner? Should we restrain him? The queen immediately stepped forward. You will not touch him. The captain blinked in surprise. This human saved my life, she said firmly. When my guards abandoned me, he stayed. When the city fell, he protected me. When hope died, he carried me. He is under my personal protection. Elias rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. You don't have to say all that. I must, the queen replied, her voice soft. Because it is true. The captain bowed to Elias. Forgive me, human. I did not know. For one. Elias shrugged. It's fine. Let's just fix this planet. They boarded the shuttle and flew toward the city. From above, the queen watched the loyal forces restore order, secure civilians, and remove remaining threats. The burning towers slowly quieted, the smoke thinned, the city began to breathe again. As the shuttle descended near the palace ruins, the queen placed her hand gently on Elias's uninjured arm. You gave me the strength to return, she said. I will never forget that. Elias looked at her tired, dirty, injured, yet still radiant with authority and courage. You didn't need me to be strong, he said. You already were. But you reminded me, she whispered. Return of the crown. The palace courtyard was full of loyal soldiers when the queen stepped out of the shuttle. The moment they saw her, they fell to their knees. Even though the palace was damaged, and the throne hall broken, she walked forward with her head high. Her cloak was torn, her crown bent, but her presence was stronger than ever. Elias walked beside her. Not behind, beside, the soldiers noticed, whispering quietly among themselves. No human had ever stood at the queen's side like an equal. Inside the damaged throne hall, the queen paused where her throne once stood. She looked at Elias. You saved more than my life today, she said softly. You saved my empire's heart. Elias shook his head. I just didn't run. That is what makes you different, she said. When everyone else fled, you stayed. Her eyes softened. For a moment, the world fell silent around them. I owe you everything, Elias. You don't owe me anything, he replied. She stepped closer and placed her hand gently on his chest, right above his steady heartbeat. Then know this, she said quietly. Wherever I go, you will not walk behind me. You will walk beside me. The loyal soldiers looked up in shock, but no one dared question her. For the first time since the chaos began, the queen smiled. Not as a ruler, not as a symbol of power, but as someone who found safety in a human who refused to abandon her. And Elias, tired and wounded, smiled back. For in her eyes, he finally understood something simple and powerful. He hadn't just saved a queen. He had earned a place in her world, and in her future.